Hello everyone, welcome to today's session. In today's session, we will create a service to fetch and show data for our shopping cart application. Along with creating a service, we will understand how do we create model for the response types that we will get and how do we type the responses appropriately. Before we dive into the implementation, let's have a look at which API we will be using to call the data. So what we'll be using is a FakeStore API. So here is the homepage for FakeStore API. It's a fake store REST API for your e-commerce or shopping website prototype. You can go to the documentation and see it has a API using which you can fetch the list of products. I will hit this and you can see it gives us a list of products. And being a REST endpoint, it also enables us to fetch a particular product. So for example, I'm only interested in product number 2, product with ID 2. I can pass this 2 as a parameter to this, and now it will give me the details of just the product with the matching ID. It's a great API to build your e-commerce prototypes, and we will be using this. So with this, let's get started. First thing, we will copy this URL and go to our application. Now, if you were following along, you would already have something like this available in your code base. You have an application which has an header, a footer. React router is already implemented on this and the routes are already configured. If you do not have this, please go through the previous sessions to get a better understanding of how we do client-side routing, how have we implemented header, footer, and how have we controlled the layout of our page. I will link the playlist in the information section. Please go through it. And if you want to understand some specific concepts in great detail, like client-side routing and others, those are also available in their own separate videos. Please go ahead and have a look. The server is running on port 3000 and let's go and check how does it look. Here is our application. Here we can see we have the home route which shows the product list page. Then you have your cart route which shows the corresponding cart page. And then we also have product details page which will come up whenever we hit this dynamic URL with any of the IDs. So the application is already set up this way. If you want to get a better understanding of the folder structure that we have implemented, I will link the video here at this particular timestamp. Please go ahead and have a look. But to implement the service, we will go to the API folder and create a new file, which would be FakeStore API.ts because we are working with a React and TypeScript environment. First thing, let's declare the base URL. Base URL is equals to and paste the URL that we got. Delete this and this becomes our base URL for our application. All the API calls that we will do will be relative to the base URL. Now we will create two methods. First one, fetch the list of all products. And the second one, fetch the product by ID. So when you click on individual products, you should be able to see additional details related to the product. Let's create these methods and export them. So export const getProducts. It will be an asynchronous method because we are making a fetch call. So that's why async. The method, let's type it properly. So promise for now, temporarily, let's use any. So we will return a promise, but we don't know what type it would be. And in here, let's go to const response. Since this is a very small application, we will use the fetch API, the native fetch JavaScript API that is available. But in case you are interested in understanding the Axios based implementation or a custom hook based implementation, please let me know in the comments and I can create a separate video for that. But for now, for this basic application, let's use fetch. So fetch, by default, it's a get call. You do not need to mention the methods and other things. We will just use the base URL along with products. And we will return this response dot JSON. So by default, this fetch returns us a response object, which is a readable stream. Since we know this is of type JSON, we can explicitly mark that and pass that as a JSON. And that's what we are doing on line number 6 and returning that particular JSON response. Now let's do the same for getProductById. So here we'll go and what we'll type getProductById. This will take ID as a parameter which would be of type number, and we'll make a call to that particular ID as we saw. Now, how do we get rid of this any? For that, we need to understand the type of response that we will get from the products that we are using. So let's have a look at the JSON response once again. First, let's have a look at the products. So products is an array of individual products. So if I have the type defined for a product, the response for product would be an array of these. So a good thing would be to define the product type. For that, let's limit our search to any particular ID. That's what we did. Now let's copy this. And this is exactly what you should do when we are dealing with APIs. If you do not have a defined return type, check through the response of the API that you are getting, and using that, we will reverse engineer the type that we are getting. Let's go back to our code, and inside the models folder, let's create a new file, which would be product.ts. And in here, we will definitely do one thing, which would be export the interface of type product. Export interface, and temporarily, let's paste the object that we got. Now, I will not dive too deep onto interface and types. There is a separate video that I've already done, which covers the topic in great detail, and you will get a better understanding while watching that video. So I will link that at this particular timestamp. Please go and have a look. But here, as we can see, anything that is of type number, let's replace that with number and remove commas with semicolons. Then this is of type string. So let's define that as string. And here we have our interface ready or the model ready that we will use. Let's go to our FakeStore API and change that to product, import it, and this will be an array of products. So you will have multiple products whenever we are fetching the get products. And for this particular one, we will get the product as response. And now your responses are typed appropriately. Let's see how does that help us. So let's go to our app.tsx, and in here we will start calling that particular API. How do we call it? We call it inside a use effect. Now, those who do not understand what use effect is, there is a video which I'm linking at this particular point. Please go and have a look. Where we cover use effect and use state in great detail, and will give you a complete understanding of why we have the dependencies array as empty and what we are doing here. But here, we'll define a new function. So this use effect will be called only once during the mount cycle. Const fetch products is equals to an async method. Const products is equals to await. Let's import the get products and console.log it. We fetched a list of products, and let's call this fetch products method right away. Now let's have a look at our application. Here we have our application. Let's have a look at the console, and we can see products fetched in app.tsx. We are fetching an array of 20 products. So this 2 times fetching that you see in your application is because the application is running in dev mode, and that's perfectly normal. To get a better understanding, please go through one of our initial videos where we cover this in detail. So here we see a list of products. Amazing. We are able to fetch that. And the best thing with this is the TypeScript understand that product is of type an array of product. So whenever you do something like product.map prod, you will get all that auto completion that comes. So it understands, okay, this is a product response that I'm getting, and these are all the fields which are available. So rating was a complex object, and you can see rating.count, rating.rate is available here in autocomplete. So that really helps with your dev workflow or the developer experience. And one of the major reasons why we use TypeScript. So here we see now we are able to fetch the appropriate details from the API. Now, how do we render these appropriately? And also, let's start moving things into their proper places. So this fetch call will never be made in the app because the respective page which we are loading should be responsible for making the call for the data that it needs to show. So this is the responsibility of product list page, and let's move the logic here and move this logic here. remove unused imports, save, and let's add imports appropriately. There should not be any impact in the application. It should still work exactly as it was because product list page is still there. But when you're on cart page, you don't want to fetch the product details again. As you can see, we're not fetching the product details again. This is the log that solely comes from cart page. Now in here, how do we showcase the list of products? For that, we would definitely have to iterate over a list of products and ensure that React responds to the product appropriately. We need to ensure that it's a state variable or a reactive variable. We need to create a state variable first. And what is the type of data that we are fetching? It's an array of products. Use state, and we can initialize this with an empty array. Perfectly fine. Let's add the missing imports. And now what we need to do, we were already fetching this. We don't need this. This was just for demonstration purposes. We can reduce this. How can we reduce this? We will call the getProducts directly. And since it's a promise, we can call then. What will happen? You will get the data, which would be of a set type. And then that set type you can set to set products. And then pass the data. And if you hover over it, it will be of the same type that we declared. But what this can even be simplified as, you can just pass set products as the callback here. And this would automatically call this as a method and pass data onto it. So you're setting the data immediately. Now we have the list of products available with us in a state variable. Let's log this for now. So json.stringify. So now whenever products array is updated, we will see the log come up. Let's go to home and we see entire JSON structure comes in. Now, how do we iterate over the array? For that, let's clear this up. And in here, products.map, we will iterate over the products array. For each product, what do we want to do? We want to just showcase title of the product. So product.title. And here we can see for all the products that we get, we got this ID. And how many products are we getting? If you want to showcase that, index plus 1. And here you can see it starts with 1 and you are fetching in total 20 products. And this error that you see is something that we already talked about in the previous video. It's a really important property that we should not miss out. You should always has a key property. And since in our case, we already have a unique ID available, we can assign that to key product.id. This will help React track the individual elements on page. And now you see there's no error on page and you're able to see all the 20 products which are coming from the API. These are not hard coded anywhere in our application. And in the network tab, if you see, let me remove the preserve log, refresh, and you see the products request is fetched. And the response that we get out of it is the one that we are showing on our screen. Great. So that's it for today's session. In today's session, you understood how do we create a service, base URL, how do we fetch using the fetch method, and why are we using response.json? How do we type your responses appropriately? So we also created a model which we are consuming in our application. And that's why you get all of these good things that elevate our developer experience. You get the auto completion for the product response and everything that you get. We also understood how do we consume these services in our individual components and what is the right place to place a particular service call. Since this was the product list page and it should be responsible for fetching the product list, we are putting it here instead of at the root of our application. In the next session, we will create the product tiles so that we can see the products in all their glory and have a product listing page that's actually very good to look at. Thank you for your time today. See you in the next one.